Okay, so what I'd like to do is to start our study of the book of Joshua, to look back at Joshua as a figure in the Torah. And what I want to think about with you as we look at this text, what sort of qualities did Joshua have that, enabled him, put him in position to become the leader of the people of Israel following Moses? So I'm going to share my screen. And what we have here is, hold on. Yes. So what we have here are, what I've done is I've selected a series of passages to look at with you, including one from that we had just looked at. So the first one from Exodus 17 is from right after the crossing of the sea. Moses has led the people out of Egypt, and they've crossed the sea. There has been, let me just, I'm losing it here. There was a small rebellion against Moses, first over water and then over food. And now they are about to engage, really, after Pharaoh. And after that engagement, where they were all drowned at the sea, now in their march towards the promised land, they come across their first enemy. And we know the people of Amalek. We have several passages about them and how evil they were and how ruthless they were. Here, we're not told much about them, except that they came and fought against Israel. So again, this is chapter 17 of Exodus. And we see that Amalek came, the people of Amalek fought with Israel at Rephidim. And Moses said to Joshua, right? This is our first mention of Joshua. Pick some troops and just forget all of these interpositions. Pick some troops for us, go out and do battle with Amalek. Tomorrow I, that is Moses, will station myself on the top of a hill with the rod of God in my hand. This was Moses's staff, the one that he used to initiate the plagues.
Sorry, I'm on Zoom.
Someone is unmuted. Please mute everyone. So tomorrow I will station myself at the top of the hill with the rod of God in my hand. Joshua did as Moses had told him, fought with Amalek, while Moses, Aaron, and Hur went up to the top of the hill. Then, whenever Moses held up his hand, that is the hand holding the staff, Israel prevailed. But whenever he let down his hand, Amalek prevailed. So there's something, this is in some ways, I'll talk about what the rabbis make of this in a minute. But Moses's hands grew heavy. So they took a stone, put it under him, and he sat on it, while Aaron and Hur, one on each side, supported his hands. Thus his hands remained steady until the sun set, and Joshua overwhelmed the people of Amalek with the sword. So what's important to us in this context, in terms of thinking about Joshua here, is that he is, when Israel goes to war, who is the general who gathers the troops and leads them into battle? It is Joshua. And so in verse 13, we see not that the people of Israel overwhelmed the Amalekites, but Joshua did. Right? Joshua becoming the embodiment of Israel's army. And that, of course, will set us up for Joshua being chosen as the leader of the people much later, as the leader of the people who will lead them into battle as they enter the land and conquer it. I just, since we're in this passage, want to mention this business about Moses holding up his arms and putting them down, which seems, almost magical. And the rabbis are disturbed by that in the Talmud, and they say, well, what's that really about? And the answer is that when Moses held up his arms, he was essentially pointing to heaven. And so when the people saw Moses's arms up, they turned their attention upward, and they realized that it was God who was with them and gave them the strength to fight. And it was God who assured their victory. Now, that's the rabbis. We don't see that here at all. All right, I want to move to the second passage. This is from Exodus 24. The people are at the foot of Sinai, and God says to Moses, come up to me on the mountain and wait there, and I will give you the stone tablets with the teachings of the commandments which I have inscribed to instruct them. So Moses is about to go up Sinai and receive the Torah. And what happens? God said, come up to me, to Moses. So Moses and his attendant Joshua arose. And Moses went to the mountain, and to the elders he said, wait for us until we return to you. You have Aaron and Hur with you. Anyone who has a legal matter, something that has to be decided, they can go to Aaron and Hur, and they will help them with that. Moses knows that he will be away for a long time. So it says Moses and his attendant Joshua went up, and then Moses ascended. And the picture that we get here is that Moses and Joshua go up, and then at a certain point, up on the mountain, Moses then leaves Joshua behind and continues on up. So what we see here in this passage is not Joshua, the commander of the army, but Joshua as Moses's attendant, right, his servant. And I want to suggest to you that in some ways, you could even say Moses's apprentice, that this role of serving Moses is preparing Joshua for his eventual task, which will not only be to lead the people into battle, but to be their leader in a much broader sense, in the sense that Moses is. On to the next passage. And this is now later in the book of Exodus. Moses has come down, they have the Torah, and they're in the camp in the wilderness. And there the Torah says God would speak to Moses face to face as one person speaks to another. And he would then return to the camp. In other words, Moses would go in to the Ohel Moed, to this place where, where he would meet with God. And Joshua would go with him. Moses is the one who actually goes inside, speaks to God face to face, and here his attendant Joshua, who serves as his deputy, that's how they want to translate it here, literally is a youth, a Na'ar. At any rate, Joshua then would not stir out of the tent. So Joshua here is, in some sense, now guarding the tent, right? So this is not just Moses's servant, as you will. This is also someone who is guarding that which is sacred. And another role that Joshua has is to be in some ways the leader of the faithful, that he is preserving by doing God's will. He is preserving the holy within the midst of the people. And we'll see that as we get into the book. We're going to see the concept of cherum, which are things that are prescribed that people in the conquest are not able to take or to use. Who is it? And the priests certainly have a role in this, but Joshua as the leader also has this almost ecclesiastical role. Okay, and now probably the best known of the stories about Joshua, where he plays a really prominent role. This is from the book of Numbers. Moses has sent 12 scouts, and we're going to look at this more seriously when we get to chapter 2 of the book of Joshua. But Moses had sent 12 scouts into the land, and they came back, and they gave a report. And that report, which was meant to get strategic information for them to now go into the land of Israel, the end of the Exodus is now going to take place. And they're also supposed to come back and talk about the land and the quality of the land. They come back and they say, yes, it's a good land. But 10 out of the 12, there's one from each tribe, 10 out of the 12 say it's a beautiful land, but we can't possibly conquer it. The people there are giants. We are like grasshoppers by comparison. And everybody gets very upset and very disheartened. And they want to just go back to Egypt. That's what they say. And Joshua and Caleb, who's another figure here, who we don't really know much about him at all. He seems to have had some kind of leadership position. Of those who had scouted the land, that is 10 of the 12, tore their clothing, that's a sign of mourning, and exhorted the entire Israelite community. The land that we traversed and scouted is an exceedingly good land. If pleased with us, Adonai will bring us into that land, a land that flows with milk and honey, and give it to us. But you must not rebel against Adonai. Have no fear of the people of the country. They are our prey, literally our food or bread. Their protection has departed from them. Adonai is with us. Have no fear of them, as the whole community threatened to pelt them with stones. That is Joshua and Caleb, and God's presence appears to protect them. So here we see that Joshua actually has entered the land of Israel. He's looked around. He's confident that the people will be able to achieve their goal. But unfortunately, he and Caleb are not able to convince the people, who simply want to kill them. Now, as you might know, the consequence of this expedition and its failure is that the people of Israel, this takes place shortly after it, the people of Israel come out of Egypt, they go to Sinai, they get the Torah, and now they're ready to go in. But because of this, they are condemned to die out. That generation that left Egypt are condemned to die out in the wilderness as a result of what happened with these scouts, with the exception of 2 people, Joshua and Caleb. So Joshua is now set for leadership in a different sense. Joshua was there at the beginning of the journey. He and Caleb are the only 2 people not born in the desert who will enter the land. And so Joshua represents a certain continuity. He was a slave in Egypt. He came out, he wandered in the wilderness, and he will then go into the land. And finally, we're going to look at this passage from Deuteronomy, which should be very familiar to you. I just studied it a few weeks ago. Moses went and spoke to the people, and he said to them, I'm 120 years, I can no longer be active. And God has said to me, you should not go across the Jordan. It is God who will cross before you, who will wipe out the nations from your path, and you shall dispossess them. And now here Joshua is anointed. Joshua is the one who will cross before you. Adonai will do to them, that is the nations in Canaan, as was done to Sihon and Og, kings of the Amorites in their country. Adonai will deliver you. You will deal with them in full accordance with the instruction I have enjoined upon you. Be strong and resolute. Be not in fear or dread, for it is your God who marches with you. God will not fail you or forsake you. And then Moses calls to Joshua in the sight of the whole people. Be strong and resolute. It is you who shall go for the people into the land that God swore to their ancestors. It is you who will apportion it to them. So this is another role for Joshua. Joshua will lead them. And then Joshua is the one who's going to divide the land among the tribes. I should say, really, Joshua is going to he will effectuate the division of the land, because as we will eventually see, it's actually God who will inform him of how the land is to be apportioned. It is indeed Adonai who will go before you. God will be with you. This is Moses speaking to Joshua. God will be with you, will not forsake you. Fear not and be not dissuaded. We're going to see these words, be strong and resolute, fear not and be not dismayed, are going to be repeated again and again in the early part of the book of Joshua. All right, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I'm happy to, at this point, if you have any questions about any of this or thoughts about any of this, Sandy, you can start.
So, Rabbi, do you find it surprising that out of all the people, I don't know what the number was, that were in the desert at the time that the scouts went out, that not one of the people believed Joshua and Caleb, that, that everyone else, it's just probability wise,
Yes.
was to other people that felt that they could conquer the land, and why didn't they live?
Well, I think, yes, I agree. If we were talking about some sort of rational, I mean, what we're talking about here is, right, rampant fear, right? These experts who have gone in, and remember that these are the leaders of the tribes. These experts who have gone in have come back and with this dire statement, right? These are really lone voices against the majority. Were there some people, I mean, the Torah doesn't want to depict it that way. It really wants to see them as lone voices. Hard to know, what the reality is, but I think it's a testament to really the power of fear and the willingness, of people to do extraordinary things when they're fearful. I mean, it's something that we see in our own culture today, as politicians try to sort of drum up this sense of fear among people because they find it useful in terms of their own campaigns. Other questions or comments, Saul?
Yeah, when you were talking about Yehoshua with all these different sources, the parsha we read last week, LeShabbat, Ki Tisa. Okay, this is something here that I wanted to mention. Vayifen vayered Moshe min hahar u'shnei luchot vayishma Yehoshua et kol ha'am b'reyo. Okay, so Joshua says Joshua was listening to the people, to the voice of the people during the time that they asked for the golden calf, but he wasn't. It says according to Hertz, he was innocent because he wasn't with the people or with Aharon. He was on the lower side of the mountain,
Yeah.
Ahar.
Right. So this is, in some ways, this is, you're right. I could have brought the source. I didn't really, because though maybe it would have made it more clear. I mean, the idea was, which I did mention, right? Joshua accompanies Moses up the mountain. He doesn't go the whole way, right? And now as Moses comes back down, Joshua is, it's a little bit, I hadn't thought of this before, but it's a little bit like when Moses goes into the tent, right, to talk to God. Joshua goes with him, stands at the door of the tent. Moses goes in, Moses comes back, Moses relays to the people what God has said to him. And so the tent, they say about the Mishkan, it's like a portable Sinai. It's one of the things that the rabbis and later scholars too want to emphasize, that they're carrying, as it were, Mount Sinai with them. And so there's a real parallel between Joshua on the mountain, going up only part way, and then Moses going up for the actual encounter with God. Other comments, anything else before I launch in now to a consideration of the book itself, and a bit of an introduction to it. So let me do that. So the first thing I want to say is talk a little bit about, relative to the Hebrew Bible, where Joshua is. So the Hebrew Bible, which is called in Hebrew, the Tanakh, right? The Tanakh is really, the word Tanakh is an acronym for Torah, the first part of the Bible, Nevi'im, which is prophets, the second part of the Bible, and then Ketuvim, which is writings, and it's everything else. It's a kind of grab bag of different sorts of texts. They're not prophetic. And you have, Psalms and Proverbs and a whole host of things that are in that third part. It's a kind of grab bag, right? So it's in the second part of the Bible. It's the first book in the second part of the Bible. And that part of the Bible, right, which is prophets, is really divisible into two: the former prophets and the latter prophets, the earlier prophets and the later prophets. And in many ways, the word prophets is a misnomer, because the books of Joshua, Judges, Samuel, and Kings, right? Joshua, Judges, Samuel, and Kings, which is the first half of prophets or former prophets, are historical works. The second half has all these prophets and their prophecies, right? Joshua is not a prophet, clearly not, but he's in the first half because early prophets are really historical. We wind up at the very end of the writings also with a historical section, which is kind of a different sort of, it's kind of an official court history of the people. It's called Divrei Hayamim. I'm forgetting what it's called in English, but it'll come to me. Anyway, so Joshua, the very beginning of the middle section. And there were those who say that the book of Joshua is, in fact, really should be considered a part of the Torah rather than a part of the prophets, though that's not the traditional way of understanding it, because, and that is to say that really early prophets, you could say, begins with the book of Judges. And Joshua is tied back to the Torah. People talk about not a Pentateuch, right, which is 5 books, but a hexateuch, 6 books. That if you could say in some ways the Torah actually has 6 books, and the book of Joshua is the 6th. Now, why would they say that? Well, it's certainly a continuation of the story, right? It's about the conquest. The language in Joshua is very similar to the language in Deuteronomy. It feels sort of like a natural continuation, which is not true of Judges and Samuel and Kings, which are the rest of the early prophets. And I think I mentioned once before that the Samaritans, right, who live in Israel, their Torah actually has 6 books and includes the book of Joshua. So I would say it's quasi-Torah. It's not quite Torah, it's sort of quasi-Torah. So much for its placement. Now, what about who wrote it? The Torah, at least according to tradition, is written by Moses. And certainly the book of Deuteronomy, clearly it's specified that Moses wrote it and Moses refers to it, except according to the Talmud, at least one opinion, except for the last verses of Deuteronomy, that Moses did not write the words, and Moses, the servant of God, died there, right? And then what followed was the eulogy. There was no prophet like Moses, right? So one opinion in the Talmud is God dictated and Moses wept as he wrote. The other opinion, which seems much more logical, is that Joshua wrote. I mean, from a traditional point of view, Joshua wrote the concluding chapter of the book of Deuteronomy. And those people who want to say that in the Talmud also believe that Joshua wrote his own book. Who is the author of the book of Joshua? According to Talmudic tradition, it's Joshua. Well, I shouldn't say quite Joshua. There are also traditions that parts of Joshua were written later, but the bulk of the book written by Joshua. That view is already contested by some medieval Jewish commentators for a variety of textual reasons, which suggest it doesn't make sense that Joshua wrote it. And so Abarbanel specifically says, oh, it was Samuel. Samuel was the one. Once things coalesce, there's going to be a king, the tribes are united. Samuel writes this account of the early days in Israel under the leadership of Joshua. So we have Joshua wrote it, we have Samuel wrote it, and then you have lots of modern scholars who have different opinions. Some say it was written during the period of Judges. Other people say, no, it was written much later. The events in Joshua, in the book of Joshua, take place around the 12th century, right? There were those who say, well, it was really written under Josiah, which is like around the year 900, something like that. Archeological evidence, and this has really been, it's been very contentious. And this is evidence not really about who wrote the book, but about what period it reflects. And even, is it historic at all? Right? Joshua seems to be describing history. The tribes went into the land, they did this, they fought those people, they conquered these people. The land was apportioned in Joshua's time to these various places. And so question is, did that really happen? Does this reflect some fantasy, a retrospective look back and imagining what happened? Did it really happen? And there's been a shift. Originally, early archaeologists, right through, I would say, the 60s, were really looking for evidence that this really goes back to the time of Joshua, that this is what the conquest looked like. And they found some evidence some of the cities that were destroyed seem to date back to that time. Though not Jericho, which seems to have been destroyed earlier, and it was a very small population there at the time. But there's some evidence of a conquest. It seems to be largely in the middle of the land that they have such evidence. There is sort of a widespread view that it didn't take place all at once, that various tribes went in individually and conquered the land, rather than this idea of sort of a unified army under Joshua's command. So the archaeological evidence is certainly unclear. And the question of whether there was a leader named Joshua, whether he led the people in some way or another into the land, seems to be widely held. It's not, I mean, there are people who want to claim there never was an Abraham, there never was a Moses, there never was a Joshua. All these things are literary creations. That does not seem to be a widely shared view anymore. Okay, once again, I will open it up, this general introduction. Any thoughts or questions about this, about the place of Joshua within the Hebrew Bible, about who wrote the book, about archaeological evidence, anything like that? Okay, so we are moving more quickly than I thought, and that's good. Let's then, I just want to say a word about the structure of the book of Joshua. It's really divided into 4 parts. The first part is the entrance to the land and certain procedures. We're going to see that first. Then how they fought to get into the land, what happened during the conquest. That is the first 12 chapters of the book of Joshua. Then the allocation of the land, which is chapters 13 through 21. A little story in chapter 22 about the 2.5 tribes who actually fought their way in, but then went back to the other side of the Jordan to take up the land that they had been promised by Moses once they had completed the conquest with their fellow Israelites. They were allowed to go back. There's a story about them going back. And then finally, the last section, the last couple of chapters, is about Joshua's last days, his final speech to the people, and his death at the end of the book. So that's what we have to look forward to. Now, I want to say that I'm not going to read through much of this book with you, because frankly, it's really tedious. When we get to the sections about the war, we're going to see, and they went there and they fought there and they did this, and then they went there and they fought there and they did that, and it's just very, very repetitive. There are people who are very interested in this. Geographers, Israeli geographers, find this fascinating. All the places that are mentioned, how they might have gone in, all of that. It does play a role. They tend to teach it in Israeli schools, parts of it, because it's so enmeshed in the geography of Israel, the topography of Israel, and the idea of going out. They take school kids out all the time on tiulim, on little trips, and you can go to the place where, it is said that this happened or that happened, and it becomes a way of becoming more familiar with the land and building a bond between young people and the land of Israel. So it has that function, and it's significant in Israel. But a lot of it, I have to say, is tedious. And so we're going to skip those parts. I think we will finish the book of Joshua in the remainder of this year. If we actually finish it with some time left, which I think is very unlikely, but if we do, we'll move on to the next book, which is Judges, immediately historically following Joshua, and there are lots of fascinating stories in Judges. So unlike Joshua, where we will move quickly there, we will move more slowly. Okay, so having said that, we have about 20 minutes left, and we are going to look at chapter 1. Let me just ask you, does everybody have a text? Some Bible, some text? Myra, you're sort of shaking your head. You don't. Okay, and you don't have like just a complete Bible, any other than the Chumash itself, any kind of Bible. Okay, so what I would suggest, everybody else have it? Anybody else not have it? I'm going to send out an email again with various places where you can find it, and I'm going to read it so you'll be able to follow along. And I'll send out an email for you to do that. I also suggest if you go to the synagogue, you can go, I know this for a fact, go into the library. They have lots of copies of the Hebrew Bible. I'm sure you can borrow one. So that might be the way to go. Sandy.
Remember you asked me what that camera was, that document camera that I have right here?
Yeah.
The same. I actually have, if you want, I have Alter and I can project it on the screen if you want.
Yes, that would be great. Sure. So I have to allow you to share your screen, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, so,
Let me see, I have to set it up quickly. Let's see.
okay, so
And let me see if it works.
when you're ready, I'm going to make you,
You don't have to make me anything. You just have to allow me to share screen.
I don't know that let's see.
See, let me try it right now. It said host disabled participant screen sharing. If you go to share screen and just, or I think that's where it is, or maybe participants.
Okay, so let me do this, hold on. I'm looking in participants, and there I can make you a host, but I can't,
But it should just say share, allow participants to share screen.
no, so it's not there.
All right, then try, did you try share screen? Does it give you there? Because we've done this before. We've done this, you've let me do it before.
One participant can share at a time. Okay.
Yeah.
That should work. Okay. So if you're ready, why don't you share your?
It's not, it says host disabled participant screen sharing. Still.
Well. I do not.
Well, maybe you don't want
to. I'm happy to do it. I just don't see how to do
it. Under did you try under participants? What did you say? You said it allowed me to share.
So you know what I'm going to do for now anyway.
Okay.
I'm going to make you the host.
I don't know.
That's fine. You're now.
No, it doesn't work. It still doesn't work.
You should be able to share your screen now. You're the host.
I know, but I click on share screen. Oh, yes, now I can. Thank you. Let's see if this works. All right, I just have to focus this a little better. Let's see. Can you see it? But let me make it darker.
It's a little blurry.
Yeah, I have to focus it. Just a second, I have to hit the focus button.
Okay. All right.
Not perfect, but
Yeah, okay. Let me, Sandy, let me just read.
okay, fine.
Most people have it. And,
Yeah, well, now you have to make yourself the host again, maybe.
no, you have to make me the host.
Oh, great.
So
Stop
if
share.
you go into participants and go where it has my name, and then you'll see make host.
Done.
Okay, so I'm the host. Great.
Sorry about that.
No, that's fine. Okay, I'm going to start reading from Alter, but whatever text you have. Chapter 1. And it happened after the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord, that the Lord said to Joshua, the son of Nun, Moses' attendant, saying, Moses, my servant, is dead. Right? Joshua doesn't know that. And the people in some ways don't know that. They didn't see it. Remember that Moses goes up onto Mount Nebo, and it says he died there and was buried there. And there's no one who knows where it is. So no one's been there. So we need to be informed, or Joshua, the new leader, needs to be informed that Moses is now deceased. And now arise, cross this Jordan, you and all this people, to the land I'm about to give them, to the Israelites. Every place where the sole of your foot treads, to you I have given it, as I spoke to Moses from the wilderness, and this Lebanon, to the great river, the river Euphrates, the whole land of the Hittites to the great sea, which is the Mediterranean, where the sun sets, will be your territory. So we have two things in that verse. First, a description of the acquisition of the land. I'll explain that in a minute. The acquisition of the land, and secondly, the boundaries of the land. Later on, we're going to see its apportionment. Now, these boundaries describe an enormous piece of property from the Euphrates, right? Down to the Mediterranean, right? So this is a description of the land that was never the land of Israel at any time, even under Solomon, who greatly expanded the land. At no point was the land of Israel this big. It seems a very idealized sort of framework. Even the most maximalists, sort of modern defenders of the land of Israel as the Holy Land, do not use this sort of text to define what the borders of that land are. Now, the idea everywhere where your foot will tread is interesting because it's really about acquisition. So how does someone acquire something? In the Talmud, this is, if it's an object, you can hand the object to that person and they take it, and in taking it, it becomes their problem. In other words, you're not just signing something, right? It's not a deed. You hand it to them and they receive it. And if not the thing itself, then some symbolic object. You might use a handkerchief, and each one holds a part of the handkerchief some way or another. But with land, you acquire it by walking it, right? So this is more than just saying everywhere where you walk, some sort of poetic metaphor. It is, but it's also, I've given you this land, but now you will be acquiring it. So everywhere that the sole of your foot treads, to you I've given it, and so on. And no man will stand against you all the days of your life, right? So the promise here is You will be victorious. No one will be able to come against you your entire life. And I think perhaps there's another level to this. Moses was constantly challenged. His leadership was challenged. And you remember the rebellion, for example, under Korach, who really wants to set himself up, challenging Moses, challenging Aaron. I think the sense here is you won't face such rebellions. You won't have enemies outside, you won't have enemies inside, and therefore I will not let go of you. I won't abandon you. And then again, be strong and of good courage, right? The same language that was used at the end of Deuteronomy again and again. It is the need here for military leadership is courage. You have to believe God will enable you to win, but you can't be frightened off. You have to believe that, and you have to act with courage. For you will make this people inherit the land that I have vowed their fathers to give to them. You must be very strong and courageous to keep and do according to all the teaching that Moses, my servant, charged you, right? So here, I'll lead you, but you have to follow the Torah, right? You have to follow all that Moses charged you with, not swerve from the right to the left, that you may prosper wherever you go. Same message that we got in Deuteronomy, right? This seems very much a continuation thematically of the book of Deuteronomy. This book shall never depart from your mouth, and you shall murmur it day and night. Sounds like the Shema, right? Right? So that you may keep to do according to all that is written in it. Then you will make your ways succeed. Then you will prosper. Have I not charged you? Be strong and of good courage. Do not be terror-stricken. Do not cower, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Okay? And so God has commissioned Joshua now to set out to actually begin the conquest. Joshua charges the people's overseers, saying, pass through the midst of the camp and charge the people. Prepare yourselves provisions. In 3 days, you are to cross the Jordan to come to take hold of the land that the Lord your God is about to give you to take hold of it, right? 3 days, get ready, we're going. 3 days is a period of time that we see again and again, right? This idea of a period of preparation, we see it at Sinai, for example. And this is meant to symbolize a transition to something which is sacred in some ways, right? 3 days, warn the people. This is not, of course, like leaving Egypt where it happens in one night. They're not running in fear. And to the tribe, the Reubenites, the Gadites, and the half tribe of Manasseh, right? These are the tribes that after the kings were conquered on the other side of the Jordan from the land of Israel, they came to Moses, asked Moses if they could settle there. And Moses inquires of God. They are told yes, provided that you leave your families here, leave your flocks here on the other side of the Jordan, but you go in fact, as the vanguard in front of the people for conquest. And so Joshua is now saying, hey, remember the deal, right? You get to leave your family here, you're going in, well, don't forget. Recall the word that Moses, your servant, charged you. The Lord your God is about to grant you rest, will give you this land. Your wives, your little ones, your herds shall dwell in this land that Moses has given you across the Jordan. You shall cross over, arrayed for combat before your brothers, that is the vanguard, as all the mighty warriors, and you shall help them until the Lord grants rest to your brothers like you, and they too take hold of the land that the Lord your God is about to give them. And you shall return to the land of your holding, take hold of it, which Moses, the servant of the Lord, has given you across the Jordan, where the sun rises. And they answer Joshua and they say, all that you have charged us, we will do. Wherever you send us, we will go. Right? So this is sort of an oath that they're taking. It also sounds a lot like the people after Sinai. All that the Lord has said, we will do, right? After the giving of the Torah. And here, it's not Moses and it's not God, it's Joshua who is now the leader. And they're telling Joshua that they have his loyalty, that they will go into the land. They will do what they said they would do, and only then will they come back. As we heeded Moses, so we will heed you. Only may the Lord your God be with us as he was with Moses. Every man who flouts your command and does not heed your will in all that you charge him shall be put to death. We will brook, right? No criticism of you, no desertion. Such people will simply be executed. So they are now offering, not only are they the vanguard, right, but they are also going to be his, in some sense, his palace guard. They're the ones who are going to really protect Joshua, in addition to being out in front of the people. Okay, that brings us to the end of chapter 1, which is a perfect place to stop. I want to go back and, just the opposite of what I wanted to do. Any questions, any comments so far, Saul?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was just looking ahead at chapter 12, where he mentions all the kings who were conquered and slaughtered. And it kind of reminds me, since we're getting closer to Purim, the 10 sons of Haman.
It's very nice. Yes. Just a list, right? One after another. Yep. Good. And that in chapter 12 is really kind of rounding off this first, I'll talk about it when we get to it, but it's sort of rounding off this first section with a kind of summary at the end of all the conquest that's taken place. Any other questions or comments? All right. So we will pick up next week with chapter 2. We'll spend some time with chapters 2, where we're really talking about the rituals for crossing the Jordan, what's going to take place on the other side before we get actually to the military conquest of the land. I will see you then. I wish you a great week.
Thank you, Rabbi.
And
Thank you.
look for my email again. I'm going to resend it in terms of where you can find the text. I am reluctant to, the other thing I could do is I could try to use the text from Sepharia and share my screen and put it up. I just don't love the translation there. That's why I'm reluctant to do it. But if people have trouble, that is the direction I could go. Okay. See you all next week. Have a great week.